It started on an unusually quiet night. You know those nights where even the hum of distant traffic seems to vanish, where the shadows feel heavier, pressing against your windows like they're watching? That was the kind of night it was. The clock on my bedside table read 1:57 a.m. I remember because I couldn't sleep, though there was no reason I could name. It felt like the air itself was holding its breath. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, bathed in the dull blue glow of my phone. The world outside my window was a thick blackness, not even the usual street lamps breaking through. It was as if the entire neighborhood had been swallowed by some unseen presence. And then the silence was shattered. A sharp, high-pitched ping jolted me upright. My phone screen lit up instantly, and within a second, another ping echoed from the living room. My roommate Erin's phone. I wasn't the only one awake. A notification banner sprawled across my screen, and in bold, blocky letters it read, "Emergency alert. 2 a.m. warning. We apologize." No explanation. No sender. Just those words. My stomach tightened. I wasn't one to panic easily, but something about that message felt wrong. It wasn't the usual amber or weather alert. No blaring sirens. No instructions to evacuate or shelter in place. Just an apology. 2 in the morning. From God knows where. A moment later, Erin's voice cracked through the apartment. "Casey. Did you get that too?" I climbed out of bed, grabbing my phone like a lifeline, and opened my bedroom door. Erin stood in the hallway, her phone held out in front of her like she was afraid it might bite. The same message glared back at us from both screens. "I have no idea what this is," I said, my voice hoarse. Erin glanced toward the window. "It's dead out there. No cars, no lights. Even the street lamps are out." I followed her gaze. She was right. Not a single light. Not even the flicker of a television in a neighbor's window. It was as though the world had paused. And then, as if choreographed, both our phones buzzed again. "Emergency broadcast. Update. We apologize for what we must do." I felt a cold sweat bead on my back. Erin looked at me, her lips trembling. This has to be a hack, right? Or some prank. But deep down I knew it wasn't. The air had shifted. The apartment felt colder, denser, like something had seeped into the very walls. I decided to check outside. Against better judgment, I stepped out onto our small balcony. The street below was a lifeless stretch of black. No headlights, no passing late-night dog walkers. Just thick, suffocating darkness. And then, across the other apartment building, a single light flickered in a window. A figure stood there, motionless. I couldn't make out any details, just the outline of a person. But what made my skin crawl was the way they seemed to be staring directly at me. Not looking out into the night, but at me. I stumbled back inside, slamming the balcony door shut. "There's someone watching," I whispered. Erin's eyes widened. "We should call the police." But our phones had no signal. No bars. No Wi-Fi. Just that same chilling emergency banner locked on the screen. And then, the third message came. "To those awake at 2 a.m. You will remember this. We apologize for the inevitable." That was when the power went out. The overhead light blinked once, then died. The digital clock on the oven in the kitchen went dark. The only light came from our phone screens, a sickly, cold blue glow. Neither of us spoke. We didn't have to. We both felt it. A presence in the room. A pressure, like we were being observed by 1,000 unseen eyes. The hair on my arms prickled. Then came the sound. A soft, mechanical whirring, followed by a faint voice. Grainy, distorted like an old radio broadcast. "This is not a test." We spun toward the sound. It was coming from Erin's phone speaker. The screen remained blank, no video or call, just the voice. "You were not meant to be awake. We apologize." Erin dropped her phone like it had burned her. I grabbed mine, but the screen was frozen, unresponsive. The voice spoke again, closer now, as though it wasn't just coming from the phone. "This is the hour between worlds." And then, a knock at the front door. It was soft, polite even. 3 measured taps. Erin clung to my arm, her nails digging into my skin. "Don't," she whispered. But I had to know. Against every instinct screaming in my head, I approached the door. Through the peephole I saw nothing. Just blackness. No hallway, no light from the emergency exit sign. It was like looking into a void. And yet, the knocking came again. I backed away, and as I did, another message arrived. "Do not open the door. We apologize for the intrusion." I showed Erin, and her face turned ashen. "What the hell is happening, Casey?" I didn't have an answer. We huddled together in the living room, every window covered, our phones clenched like totems against the dark. The voice hadn't spoken again, but we could still feel it, hovering on the edges of perception, a static charge in the air, an oppressive weight in our chests. Minutes or maybe hours passed. It was impossible to tell without clocks or sunlight. Then a final message. "If you survive, remember this night. We apologize." Transmission end. And just like that, the power surged back on. The room lights blinked alive. The hum of the refrigerator returned. Our phones rebooted themselves. No messages in the log. No trace of any alerts. The street lamps outside flickered to life, and a car passed down the road like nothing had happened. Erin and I looked at each other. Disbelief etched into our faces. "It's over?" she asked, her voice a thin whisper. But I wasn't so sure. Because in the corner of my phone's lock screen, beneath the date and time, a single word remained. "Apology received." And then my phone rang, an unknown number, no caller ID. It was 2:03 a.m. The phone rang. A simple, shrill sound, so ordinary in any other moment. But now it cut through the heavy silence like a scalpel, sharp and cruel. The caller ID was a blank, featureless void. No number. No name. Just the word unknown. Erin looked at me, her eyes glassy with fear. Neither of us moved. It rang again. And again. I swallowed hard, feeling the weight of it press against my chest. Every instinct screamed to let it ring, to ignore it, to throw the phone out the window if I had to. But a deeper part of me, some ancient primal curiosity, needed to know. On the 5th ring I answered. I didn't say anything. Just held it to my ear, breath shallow, heart hammering. For a moment there was nothing. Just a hollow, static hiss, like a television tuned to a dead channel. Voice. Monotone. Neither male nor female. It was like 1,000 voices layered over each other, speaking in perfect unison. "You should not have stayed awake." A chill swept down my spine. I opened my mouth, but my throat felt raw, like I hadn't spoken in hours. "What do you want?" I managed, my voice brittle. Erin was clutching the edge of the couch, eyes darting between me and the dead black windows. "You have been marked," the voice said. "The apology was not meant for you." I swallowed, my mouth dry as sand. Then, who was it meant for? There was a pause, and then the faint sound of something moving in the background. A wet, slithering scrape that made my stomach twist. "Those between worlds," it answered. "But you heard it. Now you belong to the in-between." The call cut off. I stared at the screen. The call log showed nothing. No incoming call. No missed call. No evidence that anything had happened. Erin spoke, her voice trembling. "Who was it?" I didn't answer. Couldn't. Because even repeating those words would have made them real, given them weight. Instead, I rose to my feet and crossed the room to the window. The street outside looked almost normal now. Lights on in a few apartments, a car idling at a stop sign. But something was off. Subtle but unmistakable. The sky. It wasn't black anymore. Not quite. It was dark gray. A shade I'd never seen before, like ash and smoke smeared across the heavens. And there were no stars. No moon. Just that endless, swirling gray. Then I saw them. Figures. Not people. Shapes. Standing motionless along the street, spaced evenly apart. Unmoving. Each one tall, thin, humanoid but wrong. They didn't seem to have faces, or maybe their faces were just shadows. Even in the dim glow of streetlights, they appeared hazy, blurred around the edges like a smudge on a photograph. I stumbled back. "Erin, look." She crept to my side, peered out, and gasped. "What the hell are they?" Had no answer. And then our phones pinged again. Another emergency alert. But this one was different. A single word. We didn't wait. Grabbing a pair of blankets, we bolted for the narrow hallway closet. It was cramped, barely big enough for both of us. The air inside was thick with the scent of old coats and mothballs. We pulled the door closed until only a sliver of light remained. The apartment fell silent again. Erin's breath was ragged. I could feel her hand trembling in mine. We stayed like that for what felt like an eternity, straining to hear any sign of movement. Every creak of the floorboards, every distant hum made my pulse quicken. Then the doorknob turned. Not quickly, slowly, as if whatever was on the other side knew exactly where we were, savoring the moment. I clamped my hand over Erin's mouth as she let out a tiny sob. The knob rattled again. And then, it stopped. A long, heavy silence followed. And then the voice returned. This time not through a phone. It was in the air itself, inside the walls, vibrating in our bones. Apology rescinded. A flash of searing white light filled the apartment. And then, nothing. No sound. No sensation. Just empty, endless black. I woke up on the living room floor, my head pounding like someone had driven nails through my skull. Erin was beside me, pale and shivering. Sunlight filtered through the window. Real sunlight. Warm. Golden. The apartment looked normal. The clock on the oven read 9:12 a.m. The street outside bustled with morning commuters. Joggers, cars, delivery vans. Like nothing had happened. Erin stirred, clutching her head. Was it a dream? But it hadn't been. Because our phones were still there on the coffee table, the final message burned into the lock screen. Apology rescinded. You remain marked. No notifications. No signal loss. Everything else on the phones worked. But that message wouldn't go away. And then we saw the news. All over town, missing person reports. People who vanished overnight. Police baffled by power surges and unexplained broadcasts no one could trace. Some residents claimed to have received a strange emergency alert, though most had no memory of it. Glitch, they said. Hacker, maybe. But those of us who were awake at 2:00 a.m. We knew better. We were connected now. To something ancient. Something inhuman. Something that had only grazed our world and left a scar. The most chilling part. Across multiple social media posts, one detail kept surfacing. In every neighborhood, in every town, there had been reports of figures standing in the street. Faceless, motionless, and always, right at 2 a.m. I tried to piece together what had happened. Research forums, old folklore, government conspiracies, anything. And then I found it. A single obscure thread on a deep web message board, posted years ago by a user who vanished without a trace. The title of the thread. The Apology Hour. A warning for the waking. Inside was a single post. At 2 a.m. the veil thins. The dead speak. The watchers cross over. If you're awake to hear the apology, it means they see you. Means you're marked. Do not answer. Do not look. Above all, survive until dawn. And beneath that, they always apologize before they come. My blood turned to ice. I turned to Erin. We need to get out of here. But before she could respond, the power flickered. The apartment darkened. And our phones buzzed again. 1:58 a.m. Another message. We apologize for the continuation. I stared at the screen, dread rising in my throat. This wasn't over. It would never be over. The clock read 1:58 a.m. Casey and Erin sat in tense silence, their eyes fixed on their phones. The message lingered. We apologize for the continuation. The room was cloaked in darkness, save for the dim glow of their screens. The air felt thick, as if the very atmosphere was holding its breath. Suddenly, the lights flickered, casting erratic shadows across the walls. The hum of the refrigerator ceased, and the apartment plunged into an oppressive silence. Aaron whispered, "It's happening again." Casey nodded, his throat dry. "We need to find out what's causing this." They moved cautiously to the window. Outside, the street was deserted. The figures from the previous night were absent, but an unnatural stillness pervaded. Aaron's phone buzzed. "The veil is thinning. Prepare." A chill ran down Casey's spine. The veil? Between what? Before Aaron could respond, a low, resonant hum filled the room. It was a sound that seemed to emanate from everywhere and nowhere, vibrating through their bones. The television turned on by itself, displaying static. Amid the white noise, a distorted image flickered, a shadowy figure with glowing eyes. A voice, garbled and echoing, spoke from the TV. "You have been marked." The apology was a warning. Casey stepped back, heart pounding. "What do you want from us?" The figure's eyes intensified. "To witness. To remember. To warn others." The screen went black. Aaron turned to Casey. "We need answers. Maybe that thread you found online has more information." They retrieved Casey's laptop. The internet connection was unstable, but the thread titled, "The Apology Hour. A Warning for the Waking" was still accessible. A new post had appeared. "If you've received the apology, it's already too late. They see you. They know you. The veil between worlds is thinnest at 2 a.m. Do not sleep. Do not wake. Just endure." Suddenly, a loud knock echoed from the front door. 3 deliberate, measured raps. They froze. "Another knock." Casey whispered, "We can't open it." Aaron nodded, backing away. The knocking ceased. Their phones buzzed simultaneously. "Do not engage. Seek entry." Temperature dropped sharply. Their breath became visible in the frigid air. A whispering chorus filled the apartment, unintelligible yet deeply unsettling. Aaron clutched Casey's arm. "We need to leave." They grabbed their coats and cautiously opened the back door, stepping into the alley. The city was eerily quiet, the usual urban sounds absent. As they moved through the streets, they noticed others, people wandering aimlessly, eyes glazed, murmuring apologies. One man approached them, tears streaming down his face. "I'm sorry. So sorry." Casey tried to speak, but the man collapsed, convulsing. A shadowy mist rose from his body, dissipating into the air. Aaron gasped. "What is happening?" A nearby digital billboard flickered to life. "The apology is spreading. No one is safe." They continued toward the university library, hoping to find historical records or texts that might shed light on the phenomenon. Inside, the library was deserted. Dust motes floated in the air, illuminated by the flickering fluorescent lights. They searched through ancient tomes and manuscripts, eventually finding a reference to the Apology Hour in a 17th-century journal. "At the stroke of 2, the veil doth wane, and shadows cross into our realm. The apology is their herald, a lament for the souls they claim." Aaron looked at Casey. "This has been happening for centuries." Suddenly the building shook. Books fell from shelves, and a deafening roar filled the air. They ran outside. The sky was a swirling vortex of darkness and lightning. Figures descended from the clouds, their forms shifting and ethereal. People screamed, running in all directions. Casey and Aaron held hands, determined to face whatever came next together. Their phones buzzed one final time. "The apology is complete. The veil is broken." The world was never the same again. When the veil broke, the world didn't end. Changed. The first thing I noticed was the sky. It wasn't black anymore, nor was it morning. It was a strange, purplish gray that seemed to pulse and shift like a living thing. Wisps of mist curled through the streets, and the sun, if it still existed, was hidden behind a heavy shroud. The city was wrong. Buildings stood where they shouldn't. Streets twisted into unfamiliar angles. Everything familiar had been altered, as though reality itself had been rewritten by something that didn't quite understand the human world. And those figures, they were everywhere now. Tall, faceless forms drifting silently through the streets, past homes, cars, even people. Most folks didn't react. Many looked half asleep, wandering aimlessly, their faces slack and eyes glassy. The apology had done something to them. But not to us. Not yet. "Casey," Erin said beside me, her voice thin and trembling. "Look." Ahead of us, in the middle of a once busy intersection, stood a massive fissure in the ground. It wasn't like a normal sinkhole or crack. It was perfectly circular, edges jagged and blackened like something ancient had clawed its way up from beneath. From within the fissure, a pale, sourceless light glowed. A voice whispered from nowhere and everywhere at once. "Witness." Erin grabbed my hand tightly. "We need to move." We weaved through the empty streets, avoiding the silent figures as best we could. They didn't seem interested in us directly, though every so often one would pause, its head tilting toward us, as if considering. Every time it happened, my skin prickled and the air around us grew cold. I don't know how long we ran before we found the church. It stood at the end of a crooked street that I was sure hadn't been there before. A small, stone building with heavy wooden doors and stained glass windows that shimmered strangely in the purple-gray light. Erin hesitated. "Should we?" He nodded. Inside, the air was heavy with incense and dust. The sanctuary was dimly lit by flickering candles. And we weren't alone. A group of survivors huddled together in the pews, maybe a dozen in total. Their faces were drawn and pale, their eyes hollow with fear. An older woman in a tattered sweater stepped forward. "You saw it too," she said. I swallowed hard. "What is it?" She gestured for us to sit. "They call it the veil. It's what separates our world from theirs. It thins sometimes, but this..." She shook her head. "I've never seen it like this." Erin's voice cracked. "Who are they?" "No one knows," the woman whispered. "Old things. Butchers. They don't belong here, but the apology. It's their way in." I shivered. Another man spoke up. "Some say the apology is a glitch. A warning from a future version of humanity, trying to stop this before it begins." A teenage girl, no older than 16, sat rocking back and forth, clutching her phone. On its screen, a single message glowed. "It was never meant for you." I looked around. "How do we stop it?" The old woman hesitated. "We can't. But there's a place. Tower. Beyond the broken districts. Some say if you reach it before the third apology, you can undo the breach." Erin frowned. "Third?" The woman nodded gravely. "The first was the apology. The second was the continuation. The third is the claiming." A deep chill settled into my bones. "When will it happen?" I asked. The woman checked an ancient-looking pocket watch. "Soon." A bell tolled somewhere far in the distance. Erin gripped my arm. "We have to find that tower." We gathered supplies. Flashlights, batteries, old maps, anything we could scavenge, and set out again. A few others from the church chose to stay behind, too terrified to risk the journey. As we stepped back into the streets, the mist thickened. Time no longer made sense. It felt like both minutes and hours passed as we navigated the twisted streets and broken avenues. Reality itself seemed to warp, with buildings shifting and moving when we weren't looking. At one point we passed a playground, its swings creaking though no wind blew. On one swing, a figure sat motionless, a child-sized shape with a featureless face. Erin refused to look at it. We pressed on. The further we went, the stranger things became. The laws of physics bent, streets leading in impossible loops, the horizon folding in on itself. Gravity wavered. Our phones displayed impossible timestamps. 25:13 a.m. 26:47 a.m. Numbers that didn't exist. And then we saw it. The tower. It rose impossibly high into the swirling sky, a jagged spire of black stone that seemed to pulse with a sickly green light. It stood in the center of what had once been the city's park, Now a wasteland of twisted trees and ash. But between us and it, hundreds of figures. Not just the tall, faceless ones now, but new things. Crawling shapes, flickering, transparent silhouettes. Things with too many limbs and eyes. Erin's face was pale. How do we get through them? I didn't know. But then our phones pinged. Final apology incoming. Last chance to hide. Another message followed. Or run. I looked at Erin. We can't hide. Not now. She nodded, her face a mixture of terror and resolve. We run, she said. And we did. Through the mist. Past the watchers and the broken people. Around the impossible fissures and the hunched, flickering shapes. Toward the tower. I don't remember much of the run itself. Only flashes. Scream cut short. Erin pulling me forward as my leg nearly gave out. The sound of something wet and heavy dragging itself behind us. The tower loomed closer. And then a voice. Deep, ancient, and inescapable. The apology was mercy. The continuation was grace. The claiming is inevitable. The ground beneath us split. I grabbed Erin's hand, yanking her forward. At the base of the tower stood a heavy door marked with ancient runes. It shimmered with that same pale, sourceless light. I slammed my hand against it. The door opened. We stumbled inside. And for the first time in what felt like eternity, silence. The air was warm, clean. The inside of the tower wasn't what I expected. It was endless, a circular chamber that stretched impossibly high, with walls lined by thousands of tiny windows, each showing a different scene. People sleeping, a stormy sea, a battlefield, a child crying in a dark room. In the center stood a figure. Not like the others. This one had a face. It looked a human. Man. Or the memory of one. His eyes were ancient. His skin pale. His voice, when he spoke, was like wind through dead leaves. You shouldn't be here. I stepped forward. We didn't have a choice. He studied us, a hint of sadness in his expression. No, you didn't. Erin spoke. What is this place? What's happening to our world? The figure gestured to the walls. A crossroads. The apology is a signal. A crack in the curtain between realities. It happens every few centuries. Your world was meant to sleep through it. But something interfered. Can we stop it? Yes. He looked away. Not stop. But perhaps redirect. He beckoned us closer and placed a small, obsidian stone in my palm. It was warm, humming softly. Place this at the heart of the breach. The place where your world cracked open. It will buy you time. Close the way. Erin's voice broke. Will it end this? The figure shook his head. It will delay it. Until the next apology. A heavy, sinking feeling settled in my chest. He stepped back. Go. Without another word, the chamber dimmed, and we found ourselves standing outside the tower. The fissure in the intersection pulsed ahead, wider now. Figures gathered around it, swaying. I clutched the stone. Erin nodded. And together, we ran toward the heart of the breach. The stone in my hand burned with a searing heat, its surface humming like a forgotten engine coming to life. Every step felt like an eternity. The fissure in the street had grown larger. The ground around it warped as if reality itself was crumbling under the weight of something far older and darker than anything I could comprehend. Erin's grip on my arm tightened. Her breath was shallow, panic creeping into her voice. Casey, it's not just the people. It's the world. It's falling apart. He nodded. The sky above was no longer purple-gray. It was a churning black vortex, as if the heavens themselves were in the throes of a violent, unrelenting storm. And in the streets, the figures we'd seen before, the faceless ones, were no longer drifting silently. They were gathering, surrounding the fissure, their movements jerky, like marionettes with tangled strings. Their eyes glowed faintly, an eerie signal of their purpose. They're here for the claiming, Erin whispered. I didn't answer. My heart was hammering too loudly in my chest. I couldn't focus on anything but getting to the breach and closing it before the world we knew was lost forever. The fissure pulsed again, a deep, guttural sound that rattled my bones. It was no longer just a crack in the earth. It was a living wound. Tendrils of black smoke began to rise from it, swirling around the figures like smoke before a fire. As they moved, they spoke in unison, their voices a low, resonating hum. "We are the forgotten claimants, the ones who linger in shadows." The words echoed through the streets, rattling my skull. They weren't speaking to us. They were speaking to each other, preparing for whatever ritual was about to unfold. Aaron was already moving, pulling me forward. "We can't waste any more time. We need to place the stone at the center." I nodded, though doubt gnawed at my insides. What if it wasn't enough? What if the stone wouldn't work? What if this was all just a delay, a false hope that would make things worse? But I couldn't let myself think about that now. We had to try. The closer we got to the fissure, the more oppressive the air became. It was thick with the scent of rot and decay, and the ground beneath our feet seemed to shift, making every step feel like it might be our last. I could hear the faint hum of something ancient. The sound grew louder, a low, vibrating pulse that seemed to come from the fissure itself. We reached the edge of the breach, where the ground had split wide open. The smoke curled up from the depths, and the faces of the claimants glowed dimly in the haze. Aaron looked up at me. "Do it." I stepped forward, the stone pulsing in my hand as if it were alive. As I approached the center of the breach, the air crackled with energy, and I felt it before I saw it. A shape, darker than the night, began to form from the smoke, a figure massive and formless, rising from the depths of the fissure. It was them, the true claimants, the entity that had been waiting for this moment. I thrust the stone into the ground at the center of the breach, praying that it would do what we hoped it would. The stone sank into the earth, and for a moment there was nothing. Silence. Pause that felt like an eternity. Then the ground shook. The smoke roiled, forming into hundreds of tendrils that whipped around us, the figures writhing in agony as their bodies began to distort. The claimants screamed in an inhuman chorus, their voices deafening as they clawed at the air. I could feel the force of their power, the crushing weight of it pressing against me, threatening to rip my soul from my body. The stone in the ground began to glow with an intense light, the heat from it radiating outward, scorching the air. The figure in the center of the breach, the one leading the claimants, turned its featureless face toward us. For a moment I saw its eyes, a deep, empty void, and I knew it was looking straight at me. "You think you can stop it?" The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, a whisper that echoed in my mind, seeping into every corner of my thoughts. "This world belongs to us. It always has." Aaron screamed, pulling me back. But I couldn't move. I couldn't look away from the figure. It was too powerful, too ancient. I felt Erin's hand slip from mine as she was pulled into the darkness. "No!" I shouted, reaching for her. But it was too late. The figure stretched its arms wide, and the world around us began to collapse. Time stopped. The buildings around us twisted and crumbled, the streets splitting apart, the sky above tearing open like a paper cut. Then everything went black. When I opened my eyes, I was lying on the ground. My body ached, and I could feel the weight of something heavy pressing down on me. Slowly I lifted my head. Erin was beside me, unconscious, her face pale but unharmed. The breach had closed. The figures were gone. But the world was not the same. We were no longer in the city. We were in a wasteland, a place where the air was thick with ash, the ground cracked and barren. The horizon stretched endlessly, a land of desolation. Erin stirred, groaning softly. She looked around, confusion in her eyes. What happened? I didn't know. The stone had worked, but at what cost? Had we stopped the claiming, or had we just postponed it? We stood, the silence around us suffocating. Then I saw something in the distance. Figure. One of the claimants. Moving toward us. I turned to Erin. "We need to go." We ran. But in the back of my mind I knew something. The claiming wasn't over. It had only just begun.